They don't tell you this part, they don't show it in Instagram reels, they don't put it in divorce celebration TikToks, but there's a quiet pattern that keeps repeating. A woman leaves her marriage. She feels powerful, free, unstoppable for a while. Then slowly, something starts to shift. The attention changes, the dating pool changes, her emotional reality changes, and years later, many of these women end up in a place they never imagined when they signed those divorce papers. Not necessarily broke, not necessarily miserable, but disillusioned. And today we're going to talk about why. Not to attack women, not to shame anyone, but to expose a psychological trap that modern culture refuses to admit exists. And if you're a man who's ever been left, replaced, or emotionally discarded, this will finally make sense. Before we begin, a quick favour. Most relationship channels beg you to subscribe. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'll say this. If you've ever felt confused by modern relationships, if you have ever watched someone you love turn into a stranger, then this channel was built for you. So don't subscribe for me, but subscribe for future you, the version of you that finally understands what's really happening. Now let's begin. There is a story society loves to tell. It goes like this. A woman leaves her marriage. She finds herself. She reclaims her power. She enters a new, exciting chapter of life. And sometimes that's true. But psychology doesn't care about stories, it cares about patterns. And when you zoom out, really zoom out, a very different picture emerges. Here's what almost no one talks about. Divorce doesn't just end a relationship. It destroys a structure that gave her emotional security, social identity, stability, predictability, status. Marriage isn't just romance, it's a psychological ecosystem. And when a woman walks away from it, she isn't just losing a man, she's losing the world built around that man. At first, this loss feels like freedom. Why? Because humans are wired to feel relief when pressure disappears. The daily negotiations, the compromises, the arguments, the emotional labour, all gone, so the nervous system says, I feel lighter. And the brain misinterprets that relief as happiness. This is what I call the divorce high. It's very similar to quitting a stressful job. You don't suddenly love life, you just stopped hating one part of it. But here's where things get dangerous, because relief is not the same thing as long-term fulfillment, and the female brain, especially after years in a relationship, is deeply wired for emotional continuity. When that continuity disappears, something subtle starts to happen. At first, she fills the gap with attention from new men, validation, excitement, novelty, dating apps explode, compliments pour in, social life spikes, and she thinks, I was right to leave, look at all this. But she doesn't realise she's spending psychological capital. She's living off stored value, youth, beauty, sexual novelty, and curiosity from men. That supply does not last forever. And unlike men who can rebuild attraction with status, skill, and confidence, a woman's dating power is far more time-sensitive. Not because she becomes worthless, but because the type of attention she gets changes, and that's where the real story begins. Because once the novelty wears off, once she realises most of that attention is shallow, once she sees that the men who want her are not the men she wants, the emotional hangover hits, and she starts asking a question she never expected to ask. Did I make a mistake? After divorce, most women don't feel alone. They feel flooded. Messages, matches, invitations, compliments. For the first time in years, they're being seen again. Not as a wife, not as a routine, but as a woman. And psychologically, that hits like a drug. Dopamine, validation, novelty. The brain reads this surge of attention as proof. I leveled up. But what's actually happening is something much more subtle and much more dangerous. She's confusing access with options. Men will sleep with women they would never commit to. Men will flirt with women they would never build a life with. Men will promise things they never intend to deliver. That's not cruelty, that's biology. So after divorce, she sees hundreds of men but doesn't realise. Only a small percentage of them see her as long-term material. And here's the painful part. Before divorce, she was in a relationship with a man who had already chosen her, had already invested, had already accepted her flaws. After divorce, she's back in the marketplace. And the marketplace does not care about her history, her loyalty, or what she sacrificed. It cares about youth, beauty, fertility cues, emotional lightness, and she's competing with women who have less emotional wear, less baggage, and more novelty. At first, she doesn't feel that shift. She just notices. Conversations don't go anywhere. Ghost relationships don't stabilize. Emotional depth is missing, so she starts trying harder. More photos, more flirtation, more availability, which ironically pushes high-value men away, because men who can choose don't chase women who are chasing validation. This is when confusion begins. How can I have so many matches and still feel invisible? Because what she's getting is sexual attention, not relational commitment, and that difference changes everything. Marriage gives a woman something incredibly powerful, predictable emotional grounding. Someone is there, someone chooses her, someone anchors her identity. After divorce, that anchor is gone, so she replaces it with something easier to get: validation, likes, messages, flirting, compliments. These don't require vulnerability, they don't require compromise, they don't require patience. They feel good instantly, but they do something dangerous to the psyche. They teach her that attention equals worth, and when attention becomes your self-esteem, you become addicted to it. Now she's not dating for connection, she's dating for affirmation, and this quietly changes how she behaves. She becomes more performative, more seductive, more filtered, more curated, but less real, and men can feel that. High-quality men are not looking for a woman who needs to be constantly reassured. They're looking for a woman who's emotionally grounded. So what happens? She attracts men who want sex, men who want ego boosts, men who want temporary fun, but not men who want to build. And every failed situationship reinforces a quiet, growing fear. Why won't anyone stay? That fear hardens into defensiveness. Defensiveness hardens into bitterness. And now she's not just lonely, she's emotionally armored, which makes real connection even harder. This is the beginning of the pattern most people never see. The divorced woman didn't lose love, she lost emotional gravity, the force that keeps a relationship stable, and without it, everything starts drifting apart. After divorce, a woman learns a powerful lesson: I can survive alone. At first, this feels empowering. Bills get paid. Life keeps moving. She proves to herself that she doesn't need anyone, and that's true. But what no one talks about is the emotional cost of that realization. Because needing no one slowly turns into trusting no one. She becomes hyper self-reliant. She stops leaning, stops softening, stops allowing herself to be emotionally held. Not because she doesn't want love, but because she doesn't want to be hurt again. So she builds a life that doesn't require a man. Career, friends, routines, hobbies. Everything becomes controlled, scheduled, and safe. And safety feels good, until it starts to feel empty, because human intimacy is not efficient. It's messy, it's vulnerable, it's unpredictable, and when you remove that from your life, you gain control, but lose depth. This is why many divorced women describe their lives as fine but not alive. They don't feel devastated, they just feel flat. And here's the cruel irony: the more independent she becomes, the less emotionally available she becomes. Which makes it harder for a man to step into her world. Men are drawn to softness, openness, and emotional receptivity, not walls built from past pain, so she tells herself men are intimidated by my strength. But often the truth is, men don't know where they fit in her life anymore. She doesn't need them. She doesn't rely on them. She doesn't emotionally lean on them. So what role are they supposed to play? This is how independence quietly turns into isolation. Not because she chose to be alone, but because she made it impossible for anyone to truly get close. Marriage doesn't just give a woman a partner, it gives her an identity. Wife, mother, partner, the woman someone chose. Divorce rips that identity away overnight. And humans cannot exist without a story about who they are. So she creates a new one. I'm independent. I'm strong. I'm free. I don't need anyone. At first, this narrative keeps her stable, but underneath it, something deeper is happening. She is no longer being chosen. She is no longer prioritized. She is no longer central in anyone's life. And that creates a silent wound, because biologically, emotionally, and socially, women are wired to be part of a bond. Not because they are weak, but because connection is their psychological anchor. So she starts chasing things to replace that anchor. Achievement, attention, experiences, travel, sex, social proof. But none of these provide what partnership once gave her: being deeply known, being emotionally held, being someone's home. And this creates an identity split. On the outside, she looks confident. On the inside, she feels unmoored. She doesn't know where she belongs anymore. And when a woman doesn't know where she belongs, she becomes restless, which makes stable relationships feel boring and chaotic relationships feel familiar. Here's one of the most painful patterns after divorce. The quality of men often goes down, not up. Not because she wants to suffer, but because her psychology has changed. Before marriage, she was choosing with hope. After divorce, she chooses with fear. Fear of being hurt again, fear of losing control, fear of depending on the wrong man. So she stops choosing men who feel emotionally solid and starts choosing men who feel emotionally safe. And safe after trauma does not mean healthy. It means distant, unavailable, low investment, non-threatening. Men who won't leave because they never fully arrive. Situationships, casual dating, friends with benefits, emotionally ambiguous relationships. They don't demand vulnerability. They don't demand commitment, which means they also don't provide depth. And because she's still craving connection, she overinterprets small gestures. A good morning text becomes emotional intimacy. A weekend together becomes a relationship. Basic decency feels like devotion. This creates a cycle. She invests emotionally in men who are not invested in her. And every time it collapses, she feels more disillusioned, more guarded, more cynical, more tired, until she quietly starts believing all men are like this. Not realizing she's filtering for the worst ones. There's a side of divorce no one likes to talk about. It doesn't just change a woman's dating life, it changes how she shows up as a woman. When she had a husband, she could relax into softness, vulnerability, emotional expression, receiving. Now she's had to become assertive, guarded, self-sufficient, in control. And over time, that hardens her, not in a dramatic way, in a subtle one. Her tone changes, her expectations change, her emotional range narrows. She becomes more critical, less patient, less open, not because she's bitter, but because she's tired of being disappointed. And femininity, real femininity, requires the courage to be open, to risk, to feel, to trust. But trust is the first thing divorce destroys, so she becomes sharp instead of soft, independent instead of intimate, capable instead of connected, and men can feel that shift immediately. She doesn't feel like a place of rest anymore. She feels like another battlefield. There comes a moment, quietly without drama, when the attention fades, not completely, but noticeably. The messages slow down, the invitations become rarer, the excitement becomes harder to manufacture. She's not unattractive, she's just not new anymore. And novelty is what powered most of her post-divorce validation. This is the moment many women never talk about, when the social life is still there, but the emotional warmth isn't. When she realizes the men who text her don't know her, the men who sleep with her don't see her, the men who flirt with her don't choose her, and for the first time since the divorce, the sense feels loud. This is when memory returns, the small things she once complained about, the predictability, the shared routines, the sense of being someone's priority, and she starts to grieve. Not just the man, but the life she gave up. This is the phase no one posts about. When the empowerment story cracks, she doesn't necessarily want her ex back. She wants what he represented, stability, belonging, being chosen. But now that door is closed, and the dating world doesn't feel hopeful anymore. It feels transactional, exhausting, shallow, so she hardens further. I'm better off alone. I don't need anyone. Men are disappointing. These are not beliefs, they're armor, because admitting regret would be too painful. And this is how many women end up not broken, but emotionally stuck. Not able to fully open, not able to fully trust, not able to fully love. They survive, but they don't connect. This story isn't here to demonize women. It's here to show you something important. Modern culture teaches women to leave, but never teaches them what they lose, and it teaches men to feel guilty, but never teaches them what really happened. Here's the truth. Most divorced women didn't escape a bad man. They escaped a structure they didn't understand the value of. And once it's gone, it can't be recreated easily. Not with dating apps, not with independence, not with validation. Real intimacy requires vulnerability, patience, emotional risk. two people choosing each other daily. And when that bond is broken, both people pay a price. So if you're a man who was left, understand this. Her life didn't become magical. It became fragmented. And if you're still standing, still growing, still building your strength and clarity, then you're already ahead of where most people end up. Because the man who understands human psychology never gets lost in modern chaos.